welcome back to CDJR Reviews. Today I'm back at Dwayne Lane's Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram of Everett to review this brand new 2022 Dodge Charger RT Plus. It's a great vehicle and also has $12,000 in options, which I will explore today. Also, if you could please subscribe, that would be a great help. Try to hit 1,000 subscribers as soon as possible. Without further ado, let's break this vehicle down and complete a review. Now, one thing that everyone loves, unless you're being followed by a police version of this, is how aggressive the front end looks on the Charger itself. Now, to note on the RT itself, the aggressive front fascia did not come until the mid-generation facelift. Before this, it looked like a V6, but now you get the distinct look that the Hellcats and the Scat Packs do, obviously without any of the badges and the bigger engine underneath the hood. But regardless, you do get a better and more aggressive looking vehicle. On the bottom, there are these yellow banana guards, as people like to call them, and something that Dodge owners don't really know is that you have to take these off once you do delivery of the vehicle. If any Dodge owners are seeing this, please take these off unless your car is black and you have yellow accents somewhere else in the vehicle itself. In the center of the fully functional grille, you have the radar cruise monitor. This does have the technology groups, which means that you get adaptive cruise control as well as other infotainment options, as well as the technology features which do help you with both your driving comfort and safety. This vehicle does also have the black top package, which means that all the badges and the wheels on the vehicle have been turned into a gloss black. Personally, I think that's a really good option, especially if you get a white version of the Charger or Challenger. Now, you also have the front headlights, which are xenons, and they have the projectors in the insides as well. And below that, you have the hidden away fog lights. Hopefully you won't be needing those. The hood is also very nicely sculpted. The sides do not give the extraction vents like the higher level trim do, for example the Scat Pack or the Hellcats, but you do get a fully functional air scoop, which does actually feed in cold air into the engine bay to aid cooling. Underneath the hood, we have the infamous 5.7 liter naturally aspirated V8 Hemi motor, which cranks out 375 horsepower and 395 pound-feet of torque. This is the upper end of the Hemi output for the 5.7. The Challenger takes the king for the RT trim level, but this is overall in the upper echelon. Now, this is also connected to a 8-speed ZF automatic transmission, which is made in Germany, and it shifts really incredibly. The ZF is also infamous for being used in Alfa Romeos, Rolls Royces, BMWs, as well as some Aston Martins. Now, with all of that in the rear-wheel drive drivetrain, because the RT only comes in rear-wheel drive unless you're a police officer, will get you to 0 to 60 in around 4.9 seconds, depending on how well you can launch the vehicle. Now, I promised myself that I wouldn't make any boat jokes, but I think I'm just gonna get the elephant out of the room. The side of the vehicle shows how large the body is. It is very long, and it's also relatively wide in comparison to your average full-size sedan. Now, this vehicle in the RT trim level weighs north of 4,000 pounds, which in terms of its competition isn't too bad, but in terms of other vehicles at this power, it is heavy. Now, the wheels, you have the dark noise, what Dodge likes to call them, 20 inches by 245 millimeter width tires. These personally are my wheel of choice, and these are included in the black top package. Keep in mind that this is a square setup, meaning that all of the tire width is uniform with all 4 wheels. Coming into this fender, you have the black Hemi badging, again part of the black top package. These long mirrors, which you may recognize to have an additional mirror on the left side over there in the police car variants of this. And these mirrors do fold down if you have the setting toggled, that when you put the vehicle in reverse, the mirrors themselves will fold down a bit, giving you a perfect view of your rear tires so you don't curb them while parking. The windows from factory are not tinted, but I like the fact that the side sills have been colored to fit the black top package of matte black. Now, the vehicle itself does have keyless entry, which means that if the doors are locked, I can simply slide my hand into the door handle, pull on the door, and the door will open as long as the key is within range. Overall, I like the way the vehicle sits. I also like the proportions in terms of vehicle size and wheel size, as well as the overall fender shape and fender width. Making our way into the fuel door, you can see that there is no fuel cap. There is a what seems like a Hellcat on the image, which tells you to also not fill up on E85. If you are going to fill up on E85, please make sure you have the proper fuel system modifications and a tune on the vehicle so it doesn't fry the motor. I don't know why you'd want to modify the 5.7 liter Hemi in the first place, because in terms of stock internals, they're not very good at making reliable power that's cheap. One could argue that since the NHRA drag vehicles use 5.7s, those have a massive supercharger and forged internals, but that's besides the point. In the city, you'll get 16 miles per gallon, and on the highway, it will be 25. It's not the worst, but it's also not the best, definitely lower end of the spectrum in terms of its competition. Now, the rear on the Charger RT is personally my favorite looking part of the vehicle. If you do compare it to the RT Scat Pack and the Hellcats, then the front is my favorite. But in terms of the RT, the rear is definitely my favorite, especially in this granite paint color, which does somewhat subtly bring out the body lines, like you can see in the lower portion of this bumper, and these heat extractors, which are actually functional, unlike most vehicles on the market today. You also have the LED light strip, which is infamous on the Charger for quite a while. The black top package with the black Charger emblem and the black RT emblem, as well as the Dodge lettering. Alongside the Dodge lettering, you do get the trunk open button. On the deck lid itself, you get a deck lid spoiler. It's relatively large, and I actually like the proportions of this. Personally, I would not go for an aftermarket one. I would leave this be. You also have the very large 3.5-inch exhaust tips, and you can also see the parking sensors, which come with the technology package. The overall license plate bracket isn't too protruding, which is always nice in a vehicle design. Let's get on with that trunk test. I like how large the trunk itself is. You can fit a lot of people back in here, like I will demonstrate right now with a trunk test. One thing to note is that the bumper itself sticks out pretty far, so if you do not want to scratch it, I'd be very, very cautious. One thing that's nice, if you do want to crawl inside the trunk yourself, you have an easy way to do it. I say this is a trunk test pass. I have ample leg and knee room, as well as really good head and shoulder room as well. If you are stuck back in here, US government laws make sure that there is an emergency release. If you do want to kidnap someone, you're out of luck. And there's no way to go inside the cabin from here, since the seat fold latches are in the rear seats themselves. Now, excluding my trunk festivities, here is that latch I was talking about and the emergency release. You also have a nice anchor in the left if you did want to hang your grocery bags with fragile items or stuff that you just don't want to move around. It's also good. It does move, so you can change it however you'd wish. Seeing that it does go pretty far back, you can see the back of the seats. There's no release. They are in the inside. Opening this up right over here, this latch goes into place if you can get it out of the fastener, but there should be a spare tire back here. Here is the battery, and there is also the tire inflation machine, you could say. One feature I absolutely love about the Dodge vehicles in the modern era are that they have remote start. So if I put the vehicle in lock and then double press, rear seats in the Charger are a really pleasant place to be, especially with the Plus package, which gives us the Napper leather and Alcantara seats, which also make the interior smell really, really good. You also get rear seat heaters if you do live in colder temperature areas. This will come in handy. You also have 2 USB ports as well as air vents. Keep in mind that there is no rear seat separate climate controls, which really isn't too bad of an issue. You also have leather in the back of the seats. I have 3 inches of knee room, about 2.5 inches of headroom, and not too bad foot room. In comparison to the Chrysler 300, which I believe shares the same chassis, this is much, much superior. The door itself has this hard touch imitation leather, but the armrest is soft touch Nappa leather, as well as the door inserts right over here with the white stitching, and this black plastic trim piece. In the lower portion, you have a place to store some water and another place to store other things that you might want. For example, a car charger to charge with your USB-A ports. Now I'm sure that you also want to see the center of the interior, and that's what it looks like. The leather wrap dash, a part of the RT Plus group. You also have your volume options and your radio options. Parking sensor off, lane departure off, your interesting sport mode button, and your drive select system button as well. You also have your AC controls, pretty average in terms of Dodge. Here is the gear select system for the 8-speed automatic. You also have a manual mode. It does let you redline, which is a great feature. Not a lot of vehicles do this anymore. And on top of that, you have a little cubby and a 12-volt car charging outlet for your charging festivities. The center console is relatively simple, and there are two pretty small cup holders in the center as well. If I do turn the car on, you'll be able to hear somewhat of that active exhaust. One thing that I have a problem with is that it drones when you're in low speeds or parked, and that's something which I personally do not like. The rearview mirror gives you pretty good visibility of what is behind you. This is a large vehicle, you want to have good visibility. The center screen does have a film on it, since this has not been taken delivery of yet. You can see that these seat controls are here as well. You have both heated and ventilated seats, as well as a heated steering wheel. You also have a automatic mirror dimmer. We go into the apps, you can see that there is a travel link, your performance control, driver and passenger seat options, as well as your Wi-Fi hotspot. You can see that the vehicle does have launch control, and it lets you set a RPM. There is also the drive mode setup, which lets you tweak with all of the other options. For example, if I put it in sport, the race flag comes onto there, and if we are driving, then it would let me change all of these options. Going back into all of the other settings, you have your assist options, as well as the other settings we saw before. Navigation on the Dodge vehicles really aren't too bad. The voice management system works pretty well, and if we scan out pretty far, you can see that it's got really good range. You can see I'm in Everett, Dwayne lanes, if you are interested in this vehicle. Going into the settings, there are all of your additional settings that you may want, especially like the horn options for when you do lock and unlock the car, as well as remote start. There is also the mirror options, which I mentioned earlier, with the tilting to show your rear wheels. Overall, I think that the interior really isn't too bad. It could definitely be improved. I saw the brand new Durango, which I've already reviewed. I will link that in the top and in the description. But that interior in this vehicle would set this thing in stone, maybe even bring up its class and turn it into a luxury full-size sedan. I think that this is a great vehicle, and if you are in the market for one, definitely consider it. But there is a caveat. Here we are driving the 2022 Charger RT Plus. The active exhaust is purring away. This is not even in sport mode yet. Coming up across the first bend, handling feels really good. Definitely very tight in terms of its competition. A lot stiffer and more responsive than the Accord or even a Camry in that matter. Coming onto the brakes a bit later than anticipated, you can see that the Charger stops very nicely and very smoothly as well. No harsh braking. Now let's get onto the on-ramp and do a little bit of accelerating up to highway speeds and maybe even a half throttle pull. kicking down right here. That freed up exhaust does give you a crackle on the upshift, which is always very nice. I like the way that the car feels on the highway, feels really planted, especially at highway speeds of around 75 miles per hour. Alongside that, there's also the fact that the steering on the highway stiffens up, as well as the brakes at higher speeds, which is always also good. It shows that the car knows how to respond to variable speeds. Wind noise in the cabin was as expected, not too low but also not too high, definitely bearable on longer drives. I know Dodge is doing better with their cabin insulation, as the Durango now gets an optional cabin insulation feature. But aside from that, the Charger is really just another sedan, and it happens to have a really good and noteworthy engine underneath the hood. Bump and rebound stiffness are a lot harsher than I was expecting it to be. I'd like it to be a little bit softer in just an RT, but the people that buy these think they're race cars and faster than everyone else on the road. So for those types of buyers, it's good. For comparisons, I wanted to do something a little bit different, and this is exactly that, the Genesis G80, and it has a base price very similar to that of the $12,000 in options complete price of the Charger RT Plus. Now this has a turbocharged inline 4-cylinder, pumps out around 300 horsepower, and it looks, well, I'll just say it looks like a makeshift Audi 8 Series and Mercedes E-Class all in one. And it doesn't disappoint, especially when you go into that interior. This is a fully spec'd out interior with a price of around, let's say around $60,000. But in terms of a base spec, you could get one at the same price as the RT. Not my go-to, but it is definitely an option if you want to be different. Next up is the Honda Accord Sport with the 2-liter turbo and 10-speed automatic transmission, and it is an absolute sleeper and highly underrated vehicle. And it makes around 255 horsepower, and again made it to that very fast shifting 10-speed auto. This is probably my go-to choice if it wasn't front-wheel drive. The interior isn't too bad. I've reviewed a Honda Accord EXL. Leather everywhere, soft touch, and the center screen is relatively easy to use as well. The steering wheel felt good, steering response was also good. Overall Honda reliability, nothing can go wrong. And overall, just like Hondas. Here is my choice of vehicle for this segment and price range. It is a full-sized, well, almost full-sized sedan. It makes around 325 horsepower. It is a twin turbocharged inline 4, and this has a price of around $48,000, with the only additional packages being the wheels and the gray color. I try to make it as close to the Charger that I reviewed as possible. And in terms of interior as well, it is a luxury vehicle, an American luxury vehicle, made by GM. GM does not disappoint. It also has a 10-speed automatic transmission, which is mated also by ZF. So you know the quality is going to be there as well. And that is the complete review on the 2022 Dodge Charger RT Plus. Now, if you are in the market, which brings in the caveat I said before the drive, this is $40,000 and the base model for the RT. Now, this does have $12,000 in options, which means that this is $52,000. That was just a turbocharged older BMW that just drove by, excuse that. But this is $52,000 as it sits right over here. Now, if you do have $52,000 to spend on a Charger RT, I highly recommend you step up to a Scat Pack or Scat Pack wide body. I believe the Scat Pack wide body starts at around $56,000, and that is a much better bang for your buck. You get a 6.4 liter Hemi V8 motor, and it pumps out 485 horsepower. You also get fender arches and 305mm width tires. You also get sport suspension and a nicer interior with the steering wheel. The base options on that are relatively close to the way that this vehicle sits right over here. So in that sense, I would say step up to a Scat Pack or Scat Pack wide body. But again, I went over the price. I generally like the way this car sits and the way it drives, as well as the way it sounds. Most full-size sedans in this segment do not sound this nice, and they also do not have this nice of a torque and horsepower curve. It's really nice and linear. Most of its variants, in terms of competition, are smaller 4-cylinder, 6-cylinder engines with single or twin turbos. Overall, great vehicle. If you're on the market to buy one, definitely go ahead, but also consider a Scat Pack or Scat Pack wide body. That is all for today. Thank you very much for watching. Please do consider subscribing, and remember to keep on driving.